one day I caught myself acting differently, and it stopped me. Not because it was dramatic, but because it wasn't. When did I become someone new? I can list a lot of moments in hindsight, all tiny moments, nothing cinematic at all, that have really helped me recognize the progress that I've made in this becoming journey. Simple things such as when I'm stuck in traffic and somebody cuts me off or is riding my bumper, instead of spewing every colorful expletive I can think of and shouting, even though the windows are up and nobody can hear, I just say, "That's your ticket, not mine," and go about my day. Or when someone is talking to me and they're saying something inherently different than what I believe, instead of turning it into this like battle royale, approaching it with curiosity instead of judgment and trying to understand their perspective before just lashing out with my own thoughts about it. Small things like when you had planned to do all the things, like yesterday, mow the lawn and do all these things, and yet I woke up with a migraine, and I didn't try to force myself to do the things that I had told myself I would do. I chose rest, and that doesn't seem like a big deal, right? But for people like me who always feel like they have to be on, to have a day where I intentionally chose myself, intentionally allowed myself to let all the things sit for one more day so that I could take care of my body, that was a huge moment. Not a big shift, but a huge moment. And in fact, this morning when my Garmin smartwatch vibrated and said, "It's time to take a break and move," I literally told it to shut up. Yes, I talked to my watch and I said, "Shut up." Because I'm now realizing all of the different things that have been impacting the way that I behave and the way that I carry myself that aren't true to who I am. And the fun thing is, after this ground season, after this foundation that needs to be laid to kind of understand how I got to this point, everything after this gets to be the curiosity run wild, the philosophical questions of why are people like this? And, what if the world was this way instead? And I'm honestly super excited to keep recording seasons, and I hope you're super excited to stick with me because I think we're going to have a lot of fun in this journey of self-discovery. But anyways, so there were all these tiny moments, nothing big, nothing flashy, just little things that at the time I would pause and say, "Wow, that used to really bother me," or "I used to be screaming till I was blue in the face if that happened." And instead, I'm finding that I can be the grounding person for other people. And I can tell them the things that they probably tried telling me and I didn't listen. Like, it's just traffic. It doesn't matter. Don't let it hijack your day. Instead of needing someone to tell that to me, I can now be that person that tells that to someone else because I know what it's like to have emotions that just control our behavior because we react before we think. And it does take a lot of practice and, self-regulation to finally get to a point where you can pause before making the action you would have made and think about what you're going to do before you do it. And that way you know that your reaction is true and it's based on who you are and that it was thought out and not just spur of the moment. So transformation, growing into a different version of yourself, it takes a lot of small choices. The choices to like I said, not scream while you're in traffic, or to pass on the second helping of food, or, and I don't know that this has ever happened to me, but, maybe one day, passing up ice cream for dessert because you're already full. Those are the kinds of small little steps that I've been able to take over these past few months to get me to a place where I can appreciate myself more, and I don't feel like I have to apologize for everything. And it's very freeing in its own way. I still have those moments. I, will sit on the couch and binge watch, a whole season of a show and that kind of thing. But that's not always necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes I just need that rest, and I shouldn't have to justify that to myself. And now I'm realizing that I don't have to. If that's how I'm feeling that day, if that's what my body needs, then I need to honor that, and I need to go along with it. And now I have companions to support me. So this is Gertrude, and she's a big baby, and she will make another appearance in one of the episodes later in another season. But she's my big baby, and she's sitting here with me now. So let me figure out where I left off. So the reason why we do the things we do, a lot of times, as I said, our emotions take over before our brains have a chance to process what's happening. And when you go through this kind of becoming, this kind of transformation, you realize that if you slow down just long enough, your brain can catch up and you can see things with more clarity. You can hold yourself with more confidence. You can, explain things and talk with more certainty. It's not always some big dramatic breakthrough, but it usually, these little moments, it doesn't hit you the same way, right? Because they're just small decisions that you make that don't seem to be a big deal until you realize what they're actually leading up to. So I know that I have a noisy brain, we'll call it that. And I mentioned in a previous episode about how it took anything to get my brain to quiet down long enough for me to actually start hearing myself and to understand. And that's when the curiosity started to peak out a little bit, when I no longer had the constant urge to be on all the time, to be go, go, go. And I could finally start feeling more confident about myself and understanding who I was supposed to be the dog mom with literally both of my dogs playing tug of war with an already half shredded Chewbacca toy. So we're having a good day here. Anyways, the absence of the anger, the chaos, the instant reactions, it feels freeing. It feels like relief. It feels like being grounded and finally being where I'm supposed to be. So everything about this season, everything about this becoming journey that you've been on with me is going through these different stages of something happened. That was when I found out I was being laid off. And then I went through that kind of processing. And then there was a spark of, well, maybe there is something better on the other side. Maybe this did happen for a reason. And then you start growing and you start reconstructing yourself. And it's kind of like Good Bones, right? I do enjoy HGTV sometimes. And I loved that show, partly because it was a mother-daughter duo. And I think that, being able to have a family dynamic is really kind of heartwarming. But the point is, the structure is the same, but all of the parts that don't serve it anymore, all of the pieces that are cracked and crumbling and frayed from years of use get updated with new things, softer, colorful, whatever you want to call it. But you basically took the bones, the outside structure, and you made something completely new and beautiful on the inside without having to start over from scratch. Because people don't get the opportunity to start over from scratch. We get what we get, and we have to make the most of it. And I know I've had lots of episodes where I've talked about, like, my brother getting dealt a crappy hand, but he deals with it like a champ because that's just what he was given. So throughout these past few months, as I'm processing, my impending unemployment and all of those things, I get to start rebuilding myself. And since I was gutted, not literally, but it felt like I was gutted, since all of those pieces and parts of me felt like they were broken, instead of taking those broken pieces, I replace them with pieces that align better with who I am now and who I want to continue to be as I move forward in my life and in this journey. So the recognition takes time. It takes a lot of little moments, little actions that are different than what your old you would do, and start piecing together the new reactions and the new thoughts and the new feelings that better align with who you really are when you stop long enough to listen to yourself. So I didn't become someone new. I just became someone true. I I've always been this person, but my circumstances, my surroundings, being in college, being in, the workforce, being around my family, all of those things have had their impact on me and shaped me in different ways. And people are adaptive, and I adapted to survive in my surroundings. And it sounds weird because we're not, running from saber-toothed tigers. We're, dealing with office politics, but you kind of react the same way, right? You try to protect yourself and you do what you need to do to survive. And sometimes that means quieting your inner voice that's really telling you what you need to hear. And that's why this whole experience has been so enlightening for me, because I took something that was really hurtful and devastating, not because it was personal, but just because I had tied so much of my identity to who I was in that company and in that role, that the thought of having to figure out who I am without it was, to be perfectly honest, it was a little bit scary and definitely daunting. But over these weeks and months, and especially as I'm kind of sharing my story with you, I'm finally feeling like I have space, that I have reflecting that I can do that I couldn't before because the mirror was all foggy or something like that. I'm building new habits, habits that I'm proud of, things that I've said I would do hundreds of times and never really followed through are things that I'm doing now. Because before, old Amy would have said something like, if you don't do that workout, you're lazy. Didn't matter that I was tired or that I had a headache. It was irrelevant. You started a program, you need to finish it. And even though the program didn't say this is 60 consecutive days, and if you miss one day, you have to start all over, that was my internal wiring telling me that if you have one day or, couple of days that just don't align with what you thought you were going to do, that you have to fail and start all over. And this is especially part of my life when it comes to food, because I want to be that person that does my body right, eats healthy, lives a nice, long, fulfilling life. But I'm also that person that wants to go to my local creamery and get a parfait that's probably as many calories as I'm supposed to have for an entire day. Or I don't know, when the Girl Scouts come around and I want to binge eat an entire box of tagalongs because they're my favorite. I'm not perfect. And I'm okay with that, because I know that there are parts of me that I am proud of. And then there are parts of me that I can continue working on with more kindness and more grace than I had before, because I have a better understanding not only of who I am without the job, but also who I am all by myself, or with Gertrude. And Roy stole a toy, so you can't see him. Anyways, maybe becoming someone new or someone true, it's not something you notice in a specific moment. It's something that you recognize in hindsight when you finally look back and meet yourself again. We've got one more episode this season, and we're going to wrap up this whole construction, the laying of the concrete, the foundation of all that comes next. And so when this season is over, I hope you'll come back to enjoy some more moments with me where I ask the questions, weird, deep, profound, and I explore why people are the way we are. I can't wait to see you in the season finale.